I also made it in time,
Yeah.
which is a miracle.
Well, welcome everybody. Welcome, Leanie. I just hit record, so I'm starting up. And today we're going to go into our kind of in-depth historical and contextual look at Iran. I didn't put a timeline on it like I did with China, which means both I'm going to do more and less. I'm going to cover chronologically more time, but I'm going to go into it less. I'm going to go into a lot less detail. Um, but yeah, I mean, Iran is a fun topic, and I will talk about the modern conflict um, and aspects around kind of geopolitics and Iran that'll happen towards as we get closer to in time wise. But this is a Google Earth map of the modern country Iran. And the first thing that you notice, you can see a lot of this topography here. Iran is a very mountainous country. There's the Zagros Mountains along the south here, and I've got this kind of purple indicator from the Zagros Wikipedia page, just showing how extensive that mountain range is. So it reaches all the way up into Turkey, and it effectively forms somewhat of a border between Iraq and Iran. And then in the north, there is the Alborz Mountains. They kind of cut off, this is the Caspian Sea. They kind of cut off interior Iran from the Caspian and create a little microclimate along the edge of the sea. And then they're not named, but there's some mountain ranges or mountains in the east as well, leading into Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. So it's a highly mountainous country, and what that means is that it's hard to traverse, but it has lots of very valuable agricultural land in the valleys. So while the mountains themselves aren't particularly agriculturally productive, the valleys that are in between them can be. Um, and the mountains themselves also provide uh, access to minerals and other kind of resources. So, kind of indicating locations of Iran's wealth through the centuries. Um, and that name, Iran. Um, so some people have come to the conclusion that you're not allowed to call it Persia anymore, and that might possibly be racist. Don't worry, you can call it Persia. It's not racist. A white guy, will tell you that. Although Iranians are Caucasians as well, so yeah. Anyway, we'll get into that. Um, Iran, as a term, comes from a Persian phrase meaning "land of the Aryans," and this is the same Aryans that the Nazis will take over as an identity. So Aryans are a people group present in the Vedas, kind of a set of scripture that informs early Hinduism, kind of forms the underlayer of Hinduism, and also has impact on culture and ideas in Iran. And so the Aryans are just described as a people group, and the people in Iran, since Iran is kind of like on the boundaries of India, and in the Vedas they describe the Aryans coming into India from what is effectively Iran. The Iranians are like, okay, well that's us. We're the Aryans, and so historically, just because of this highly influential religious text, um, the land of the Aryans or Iran has kind of covered the region. Um, the name Persia has a much more recent origin. The Vedas are from, oh God, when were those written? Goodness grief. Does this have a? Oh, this says it's
Writ-
third century, but
Written about Year 500 BCE.
Oh, I thought they were much older than that. Huh.
Oral composition is much older.
Ah, okay. Well, then we'll say that they're roughly on par with each other in terms of age, because it's Fars now, but it used to be Pars province. Anyway, I'll leave my jokes to myself.
Hey,
There is.
Sean, if we have questions, can we ask questions, or do you want
Oh
to
yeah,
go save questions
no,
till the end?
no. Please chime in. What do you got?
Is there? Am I making the connection, or is it not? Is Iran an Aryan? Is that a connection linguistically? Like Iran sounds like Aryan.
Yes. So, yeah, Iran is land of the Aryans. That's what it means.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So that is a direct connection. And that is the same Aryans that the Nazis will kind of repurpose as their Ubermensch, and so on. But they have a history longer than that. The name Persia comes from a province. Let's see if I can get some names on here. That's Fasa I want. Where is Fars not a maybe it's not there we go. I was looking at subnational. I was looking at too small. So this whole region here is Fars province, and the we'll come to them shortly. The Achaemenid Persian Empire. This is the Persians in the Greek Wars. The kind of the Persians whenever you think of ancient Persia. They get started in this region, and it used to be called Pars. And so the language that they spoke in Pars was Persian. And so once the dynasty, the Achaemenids that was in control of Pars, took control of the entirety of the country, then the whole country kind of gets known as Persia, even though technically it's originally only referred to that one province. There was a linguistic change that p became f over time, and so nowadays it's Fars province, and the language similarly used to be called Parsi in Persian, and now it's Farsi. So if you've ever heard the term Farsi, that's just the Persian word for Persian. And this was changed. The old maps from like the 20s or older will always label Iran as Persia. But this was changed by a ruler of Iran, Reza Shah, who in the 1930s requested the League of Nations to swap it from Persia to Iran. And this wasn't because Persia no longer applied as a name, or that he was worried about racism or anything like that. The simple fact was Persia was old-fashioned, and he was leading a regime that wanted to be looked at as a modern country on par with the Europeans that he was trading with. And so he felt that it was more representative of modern day, his modern day country, to refer to it as Iran than to kind of like talk about Persia and bring up ideas of say the Greco-Persian Wars from centuries ago. What was the other thing I was going to add to that? Nope, completely left my mind. But that's the reason why the switch was made from Persia to Iran. Oh, that's what it was. Historically, also, Persia, like the Persian Empire, was a much larger country than modern day Iran. So if we look at the kind of the borders of modern day Iran, it's kind of the borders here and here. Ancient Persia encompassed Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, parts of Tajikistan, potentially even into India, almost all of Iraq, into Syria and Turkey as well, Armenia, Azerbaijan. So by having a name of Persia, the Shah thought, it's old fashioned, and also there might be this implied claim to all of these territories, when in reality he just wanted to run his kingdom. He just wanted to run Iran, and not necessarily conquer all of these territories around. So it was a PR move as well as a kind of marketing move to change the name from Persia to Iran. Any questions on that kind of first section of discussion? I know we've had some people pop in, so if you just want to know kind of what did we just cover, by all means ask that as well.
I'm in briefly. I like that you mentioned that Iran or Persia used to extend into what is today Turkey. Because when I think of the Greco-Persian Wars, I think more of, the closer geographical conflict.
Oh yeah,
between
because
Greece and Persia, in the sense of like Greece and modern day Turkey, as opposed to far off provinces in, Turkmenistan and Pakistan and what have you.
yeah, it's definitely the case.
Of course, that's a perception, but
Yeah, that empire controlled territory. I mean, it also controlled Egypt at the time, so there was no independent Egypt. It was all under Persian control. But yeah, the borders of Persia were in Europe during the Greco-Persian Wars. So that's a pretty big empire. Anything else before we move on?
Yeah, sure.
Band-Aid, was that a yes, move on, or yes, I have something before you move on?
Yeah, move on. Sorry, I don't have any questions.
Okay,
Thank you
great.
for clarifying.
Okay, so when I said I was going to cover some more time chronologically, I meant it. I'm going to start with literally the very first kind of Persian civilization, even though they're not Persian in a cultural sense. This is Elam. Elam was one of the states in ancient Mesopotamia. So if you've heard of Sumer, if you've Babylonia, Assyria, one of the states was Elam. And it was on, so we're talking about the Zagros Mountains. It was on the western side of the Zagros Mountains. So kind of the not Iranian side of the mountains. Nonetheless, much of what was Elam is in modern day Persia, or modern day Iran. And it was one of these extremely early Mesopotamian states that had impact. Sorry, why is that not showing up? Can you see the Elam map?
It's a little fuzzy.
No, it's definitely not the map. I must have done something wrong in the settings. Give me one moment, please. I know what I need to do.
Take your time.
I just need to share the entire window. Okay, what if I do that? No. This is a professional organization, you see.
Mhm.
Select a display. No, not that one. Okay. Turn that off. Put you down here. There we go. And so now you should see the map of Elam. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's slightly less jarring than just seeing the same set of
Thank
stuff all over again. So as I was trying to explain by making reference to a map that none of you could see, this Elam is on the western side of the Zagros, and most of its territory is in modern-day Iran. And then these are the kind of similar aged ancient Mesopotamian city-states. The land of Sumer, we got Uruk and Ur, Lagash. In Babylonia, you've got Babylon and Sippar. Assyria has Ashur, and I mean Nineveh is a much later city, but still, if you're thinking ancient Mesopotamia, whether it's we'll just leave it at that. It's not terribly important to belabor this point. I just wanted to mention that's the first kind of civilization in Iran. Quite a bit later, we get an Iron Age civilization called the Medes. And these are an Iranian people, so they're related to other peoples in Iran, but they're kind of semi-nomadic. I don't actually know a terribly large amount about the Medes. I just know that they are the first group to actually kind of conquer the whole region. So this is showing the Medes, I guess, around 700 BCE. So we've got Elam down here, and then this is the Neo-Assyrian Empire. The Medes eventually conquer Elam and the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Let's see if they... Yeah, so they show growing... Oh, and then this is animated, is it? Ah, let's all watch the animation together. That can't possibly be boring. And add names and dates. Please go faster. Ah, yes, the Median Empire of just their capital city. Okay.
Must go faster. Must go faster.
Okay, so this is less exciting, but what it shows is that the Medes essentially were the first one to consolidate the area, and then the Persians, the Achaemenids, kind of piggyback on the Medes and take over what they had already built and then extend it outward. The reason I even bring up the Medes at all is that you may come across, particularly when referencing the ancient world, a reference to Medeizing, or just a group called the Medes. And that's because the first interactions that ancient Greece had with a Persian people was with the Medes, as they were kind of conquering through parts of Turkey, what is now modern-day Turkey. And so, as is the normal form of cultural ignorance that occurs all the way up into this very day, the first people group you meet from a region, everyone's from there. Everyone's that. And so Greeks were calling Persians Medes for thousands of years afterwards. And the phrase Medeizing just means kind of like bowing to the Persians or adopting their customs. So these are the Persians, the empire that gives Persia its name. They started, as I said, ruling in Pars province, eventually conquering the Medes and then expanding outward. And they are called the Achaemenids. That is the dynasty name, so the family name. Their purported founder is, I believe, Achaemenus. This is a Greek kind of interpretation of his name, and I believe he is mytho-historical. I don't think he's actually real. This is a very common thing for dynasty founders. They are often the it's not Achaemenus, it's Achaemenes. They're often the mythological grandfather of whomever founds the dynasty proper. Just a way of kind of projecting your existence even further back into the past. So the founder of the Achaemenids is a guy named Cyrus the Great, and he is, he's called the Great. He conquers territory. I think he made the capital at Persepolis, Pasargadae. Sorry, he has a very impressive tomb in Pasargadae. And if I remember correctly, even though everyone is supposed to be an Achaemenid after him, his family line is believed to have actually broken and fairly quickly. And somebody else is... I thought it was Darius, but he's way down here. Maybe it is. Either way, it's... the family dynasty is continued in name, but the actual parentage of the later emperors is not fully. It's doubted that he was actually part of the dynasty, and he just took the name of the dynasty. So Darius, or you may have heard it pronounced Darius, the Great is somewhat of a second founder of the Persian Empire, of the Achaemenid Empire. It grows to, I think, its greatest extent under his rulership. I'm not going to go into all the different things. Like the guy, he's the Great, so he did all kinds of things. The most important thing for a lot of people in knowing who he was, he's the one who started the Greco-Persian Wars. So he demanded recompense from Greece because Athenians had prompted one of the Greek cities under his control to break away.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Cyrus and Darius, they almost sound like Greek names.
Yes, but that's because they come down to us through Greek translations. So if you see here, Cyrus the Great, we can see what his actual name... Cyrus is a Latinized form from the Greek Kairos. Old Persian would have been Kurus. Yeah, like the sun, Kurvash. So, yeah, his name was Kurus, and I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly because I don't know how to handle diacritical marks on ancient Persian. Sorry, I don't I don't have all that knowledge. But yes, you hit the nail on the head. We often list names in either translated form or translations of translations sometimes. So, and Darius, we've got here Dariavash, Derayavarus. Yeah. So he's also not Darius or Darius. There you can see this one. His full title in, I think, transliterated as it would be from Persian. That's a great question. Any other questions or thoughts before I keep going? Okay. You don't have to pipe in and say no, Band-Aid. It's okay.
No.
Darius dies fairly quickly after the beginning of the Persian Wars, I think, and then his son Xerxes is the main protagonist. He's the main bad guy in most of the Persian Wars, or at least the second one for sure. And of course, you may not recognize him in his historically accurate stele, and probably this is a much more obvious image for those. I don't know, 320 years old now. I don't know how many people have seen it, but this is Xerxes, And of course, in the movie and in Frank Miller's original comic book, the Persians are not portrayed anything historically accurate. Although those bulls are probably the most historically accurate thing in the whole movie. But like just the iconography of a bull, not the style of the throne or anything there, or the fact that he was like 9 feet tall.
The fact that he's not wearing clothes. Yeah.
What movie is this?
This is from 300. 2006, I think it came out. What's
That's a documentary, right?
Yeah. It's definitely, it's historical-ish. It's about the battle at Thermopylae, where during the Persian Wars, where Spartans stood against the Persian army. But yeah, so that's the Achaemenids. Oh, do I have a? I thought I heard a ping. Sorry. If that was somebody just pushing a button that makes the ping noise, please don't do that. So we've got the Achaemenids. They rule over not just Iran proper, but much territory for about 200 years. But they are eventually conquered themselves, and their last ruler is a guy named Darius III. Famously depicted in this mosaic. I've seen a copy of this mosaic. This is what's called the Alexander mosaic, even though it also features Darius III. But Alexander's at a different portion of the mosaic. I saw a copy of this in the Naples Museum. I think it was potentially because it's from Pompeii. Yeah, so it was the original from Pompeii. This is the battle where he loses his empire, where Alexander the Great conquers, just defeats him and effectively conquers the Persian Empire. There's some mopping up to do, but and then the Greeks control this vast swath of what was formerly Persian territory, and that's going to form a little bit of a regular motif in Persian history. Foreign control, foreign domination. We'll see it's usually not the Greeks, it's usually groups of Turkish origin, and they do their best to kind of adopt Persian culture, but they're ethnically not Persians, and that's just a historical fact that through much of its history, Persia was led by not Persians. Alexander dies real quickly. And so instead of getting to rule Persia as a king of kings, he is immediately replaced, or almost immediately replaced, by one of his generals, Seleucus Nicator, I think. And that creates the Seleucid or Seleucid Empire, which has most of the former Persian territory. You can see here in blue. There's just tons and tons of territory that Seleucus inherits. I will let you know that he doesn't keep it. Revolts break out almost immediately, and parts break off in all directions. But at least for a brief moment, Seleucus was, kind of Persian emperor of a sort. One of these breakaway kingdoms that also I think starts in Pars again is the Parthian Empire. So they grow from within Persia and eventually take control back from the Greeks. They are again a Parthian. I think is that a Persian language? It is an Iranian language. Okay, yeah. So they are kind of like close to ethnic Persians again. So the Greek foreign domination is removed fairly quickly. There's only the Seleucid Empire has control. They lose control, I think, after about 100 years. Like by the time the Parthians are up and running, Seleucus loses control. So It's about 100 years of foreign domination. The Parthians become the Persians that Rome fights quite a few times. So if you're familiar with any kind of Roman Persian wars, at least the earlier ones, those were fought against the Parthian Empire. At this point in time, Persia is and has been since the Achaemenids the wealthiest, the most not always the most powerful, but almost always the most powerful kind of kingdom known to everyone. So it's only once the Roman Empire gets going that title of who really is the most powerful, the richest, the empire of all empires is contested, and Rome kind of takes that title away from Persians. But in one of the early conflicts between Rome and Persia, Roman standards are lost when a Roman general named Crassus leads an army into Persia directly into a trap, and he's murdered. It's said that he had molten gold poured down his throat as a form of execution, and his standards are lost. Sorry, was that?
That was just a comment.
Oh,
I said that it sounded painful.
Yeah, it's not a good way to go. And this really bothers the Romans. At least they lost it to the Persians, which, the Persians are historically super big and powerful. But it's not cool to lose a standard. It's not cool to be beaten. And so the first emperor, Augustus, as one of his military campaigns, he actually goes to Parthia and fights them to get the standard back. And this is a famous statue, the Augustus of Prima Porta. So this is the Emperor Augustus. For a variety of reasons, I can tell you that this is done after he's dead. Mostly he's barefoot, and he's got a little cherub here hanging out with him. But the barefoot thing is a dead giveaway. This is a statue of kind of the deified Augustus after he's died. But on his chest plate here, we have the return of the standards that Crassus lost. And this happened very early in Augustus's reign. So to have this so prominently featured on something after he's dead, it's obviously very important. It's obviously really killer for him. In Roman art, Leni, yes, barefoot means that they're dead already. In other art, it won't automatically mean that. Just Leni asked a question in the chat there. If barefoot means they're dead already.
Actually, I have a quick question too.
Sure.
When you say that that Crassus lost the standards and Augustus got them back, by standards, you're referring to like the symbols of ruling, like the kind of a scepter type thing, as opposed to moral standards.
It's actually neither. It's the military standards of the legion that he was commanding. So it's this eagle here on a stick, and then there's these kind of circular discs along the stick that have various emblems of the legion itself. That's
their mascot.
Yeah, it's exactly it. It's the mascot of the legion. So those are called standards, and
so
each
You have to
a physical object that also has some symbolic meaning, rather than something that is just totally abstract.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's this physical object depicted here. Yeah, and sorry, Devo, did you have something further? I interrupted you.
sense.
Oh, okay. Okay. So yes, it's entirely possible that, I mean, so these would have been lost 50 or so years earlier. I don't know if the Persians would have kept it, or the Parthians would have kept as a trophy. So the return, maybe they did. Keeping trophies was a thing that people did, and Augustus beat them up so bad and was able to get the return of the physical standard, or a suitable replica was made. But it was, as I mentioned before, it was so important to Augustus's kind of personal image that on this statue, after he's dead, they're still depicting it as an event in his life. And so the idea that war with the Parthians was a big deal. So we can say, at least through these external means, that even though maybe Persia wasn't necessarily the only king in town, so to speak, or the richest and the most powerful, by other groups that claim to be the richest and the most powerful, they're still viewed as up there, as equivalents. All dynasties come and fall, and so the Parthians eventually give way to the Sassanids or the Sasanians. They are another indigenous Persian group, so we're again going from Persian group to Persian group, no foreign domination like we had with the Greeks. The reason I bring this up is this is the last Persian dynasty with indigenous that will be indigenously Persian that controls all of Iran until the 20th century. There are some Persian dynasties that control parts of Iran, but to control the entirety of the state, that won't be until the 20th century. The Sassanids are also super interesting because this is their first ruler here, Shapur I. Pardon me. Or sorry, second ruler of the Sassanids, but he goes to war with the Romans. And he captures a Roman Emperor Valerian and ostensibly treats him very nicely. He gets to go live in a throne upstate. Apparently, actually, he's captured with a Roman engineering or a military corps that's used as engineers, and they build a dam, the Ban die Kaiser, the Caesar's dam, and then they're allowed to retire in Persia. That's the claim. I think Roman texts say that he turned his skull into a goblet. So, little different depiction of what's going on there. But this military campaign into Rome creates one of the most fascinating sites that has ever existed, Dura Europos. And so I'm going to hijack this discussion about Persia to talk about Dura Europos for a bit, because I've done a bunch of work on material from this site, and I just think that it's cool as shit. So the site was destroyed in the campaigns of Shapur, and the reason that we care about it, this is a site plan. The reason we care about it is that there was a multitude of religious worship sites in centers in here, and they're all very well preserved. The reason that they're well preserved is the walls were reinforced with debris, dirt, debris, and destruction from some empty buildings, and that was put up against a lot of the artwork. Not because they were trying to save the artwork; they were just trying to make the walls extra thick, and the artwork just happened to be there. But it saved the major artworks from the synagogue and the Christian house church. This is one of the only synagogues known from the time period, and it is the only known Christian building from the time period. It's the earliest known Christian building in existence. The
Sean, when you say from the time period, what is the time period?
That's right. I try to avoid dates, but I guess I should give you some. So it was destroyed in 356, 357 CE, or AD. AD 356, AD 357. So we're in the middle, 256, 257. We're in the middle of the 3rd century. And brain. The material that's on display. So, I mean, I can't go over everything. I was just going to go over a couple of things from the synagogue. So this is a depiction of David being anointed by Samuel. This is from the Jewish synagogue. And then this is the Israelites crossing the Red Sea, a miracle. You see the hands of God coming in and helping things along. It's really, really interesting exploration of Jewish art. You'll notice that all of these figures are displayed here. Jewish art, very hesitant historically with displaying figures, but there's figures being people. But the synagogue was absolutely covered head to toe, no pun intended, in figurative art. This is a scene from the Christian building. It's a procession of women heading towards it could be a burial chamber or a tent. This is a photograph of Francois Coumont and Rostozef. These are two of the excavators, and this is the Mithraeum. So there is a Persian god named Mitra, and he eventually comes to Rome as Mithras and undergoes some transformation in the journey, but still more or less has the air of being a foreigner about him. But Mithras and Mithraism is very much a Roman religion. So if you can think about Christianity, ultimately in its origins is an offshoot of Judaism, which is a West Asian religion from the Levant. But the trappings of Christianity, the way that we practice or the way that anybody engages in Christianity, is very much kind of a European mold, at least if that's where your tradition comes from. It's heavily influenced by European styles of worship and what developed in Europe over time. And that's the same way here, where yes, ultimately Mitra was a Persian god, but Mithraism is a Roman religion fitting within the way that Romans understood religion, accepted religion, and kind of did religious practice. And this is just one of the cult scenes. There is a Mithraeum, a ritual center for Mithras, in the in Dura Europos. It's actually in the military camp. So I got to orient myself here. This whole region here in the north is a military camp, and I think this J7 will be the Mithraeum. That's a synagogue. I'm completely disorganized, or I'm completely disoriented. Yes. Mithraeum is. Oh no, that says J7. What did I say? Oh, L7 is the synagogue. Okay, no, I was right. J7 is the Mithraeum. L7 down here is the synagogue. Yes, that makes much more sense. And then M5 here is the Christian building. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of share that. This building, this whole site only is available because it was destroyed in a war, and it was just well preserved because of preparations to defend against that war.
Sean?
Yeah.
Have you been there?
No, it's in Syria, and Syria
You don't go to
for
Syria these days.
yeah, not for much of the last 20 years. Syria's been a little hands off. I know people who have been there, And I know people who've traveled to Syria earlier in Assad's reign. Bashar al-Assad, the former president and dictator of Syria. But no, I've not been there. It's also been heavily destroyed. It just mentions here it was looted and mostly destroyed by the Islamic State during the Syrian civil war. So, but a lot of the material was taken away from Dura Europos. Yale was the university that excavated it. So the Yale University Art Gallery has a lot of the material from those excavations. There's all kinds of cool shit. I highly recommend anyone check it out. They've got horse armor from the 3rd century, shields and stuff like that. Just bodies with arrows in them because they died and just laid down and were preserved where they laid. But yeah, so that's the kind of the height of the Sassanids, their earliest years when they're conquering and beating up the Romans. As we move forward in centuries, the last ruler of the Sassanids, Yazdegerd, I'm going to go with that, the third, is emperor when he is conducting a roughly 20-year-long war with the Romans. So the Eastern Roman Empire still exists at this time period. We often call them the Byzantines. And there's this back and forth. The Persians take control of Egypt and look like they're going to really take out the Romans, and things look very bad. And then a new emperor comes in, a guy named Hercules, or Heracles, who takes control of the army, fends off the Persians, reconquers Egypt, and fights the Persians to a standstill. And at the very moment when both the Romans and the Persians agree to a ceasefire, the Arabs invade and conquer both. So the Arabs come out of Arabia. The Muslim conquests are afterwards. Yeah. I will talk about the Muslim conquests and these two tabs afterwards. So, before I move on, I just want to ask, are there any questions on, I know I skipped over just a whole bunch of names of things. If anything's unclear or if people want further clarification on anything, fire away.
I have a question about Mithraism.
Yeah.
So my very limited understanding of the ancient world is that Mithraism was particularly popular among soldiers. And you mentioned at the excavation site that the Mithraeum was in the military section of the city.
Yeah.
So what was it particularly popular among soldiers? And if so, what led to that?
Was it particularly popular with soldiers? To the best of our knowledge, yes. Why? Who knows? That one's a pretty big mystery. We only know about Mithraism. Well, not only. We have since found some texts that discuss it, but almost entirely Mithraism is known archaeologically. And what that means is we can tell where temples were built, we can tell what they were made of, and we can tell what they had in them. But telling exactly why they were built, or even who built them, can be a difficulty sometimes. And so, why Mithraism was overly popular with the soldiery, we don't know. It's entirely possible that Mithraism was popular with everyone, but the ones that the soldiers built were made of Mithraeums that the soldiers built were made of stone, and those preserve, whereas other ones
survive better.
Yeah, and other ones didn't survive. We do have evidence. We have strong evidence for wood beam construction Mithraea in Germany, and so it just could have been just a super popular religion with anybody. But it does seem to be at the very least, slightly overrepresented in soldiers. And we're not entirely sure. It could be that it was looked at as somewhat of a unifying. I'm going to use the word cult, but please don't think of it like the David Koresh sense. Cults in ancient religions, in particular, when discussing cults or cultic activity, it's generally just meaning the act of religious kind of the act of kind of engaging in religion, more or less. Cult comes from the Latin cultus, which was the word for that. Like you're engaging in cultus. And so it may have just been a unifying cult that anyone could join. You know, we're grasping at straws. We just really don't know. That's the long and the short of it.
Thank you.
Wow. Any other questions, comments? Is this interesting? is this what people signed up for?
Yes.
This is wonderful.
All right, cool.
Yes, Dingo, it is.
All right, cool. I'm gonna add these two tabs.
I'm eating Chex Mix, so I'm not contributing very much.
Well, I mean, you just
But
contributed
it is-
the fact that Chex Mix still exist. I had completely forgotten about that.
How are you gonna make puppy chow without Chex Mix?
I don't have puppies, so it's not a.
I do. They eat
It's
my
not
cheddar
for
cheese
puppies.
Chex Mix.
Oh, it's
It's a kind of party mix.
The puppies will
oh.
try-
I see. I'm sorry.
You cover it with like
It's-
dusty sugar and chocolate.
Oh yeah.
In
means-
the southern U.S., we call it reindeer food.
Mm.
That's fair.
Same thing. Just
Yeah, I think puppy chow's more like Midwest.
Yeah, I do love that it is a universal party snack.
Mm.
It's great.
Is delicious.
But you
I
can't
eat too
feed it
much
to
then.
puppies though, because it's covered in chocolate.
Oh yeah, no.
Although my
Depends
dogs
on
eat
whether-
trash, so
Depends on whether or not you like your puppy.
I will let
Yeah.
everyone know that I do record this and post it to YouTube.
anyway. Big gulps, huh?
He's taking big gulps
Oh,
for
nice
me.
talking to you.
Pardon me, sorry, I had to sneeze.
Bless you.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on. The success, or however you want to put it, the stalemate of the Persian Romano-Persian Wars led to invasion from afar. So just to kind of give a little bit of context on the Arabs, Muhammad had his vision in the early 7th century, the early 600s, and spends the majority of the 600s unifying the Arab Peninsula. And then I'm pretty sure that's it, because then he dies, and his successors his immediate successors lead something which is called the Rashidun Caliphate, and they start wars of conquest against both the Sassanid Empire and the Byzantine Empire. This is the Romans of the era. The Romans lose the entire Levantine coast and all of North Africa, and eventually Cyprus and so on. But they maintain what is now modern-day Turkey and Greece. The Sassanids lose everything. The Sassanids are completely conquered. This is partially explained I remember reading in one book that the Romans, there's a mountain range here that kind of protects Anatolia, this is Turkey, from the rest of the region. And the Romans had a reserve army still on this side. So even though they lost kind of battles and territory on this side of the mountain range, they had enough soldiers on the other side of the mountain range to fight back. Whereas the Sassanids, even though they have the Zagros as somewhat of a formidable barrier, did not have a reserve force on the other side. their soldiers were all out here and died. That's no idea how accurate that is, but that is the narrative that I remember reading myself, and I'm passing on to you uncritically. And what this means is the Sassanid Empire is now under the foreign domination, so Arabs run it, and it is now suffering from, for the first time, religious domination. So, two Persian religions that one still exists, one does not, but that did exist at the time of the Arab conquests. Manichaeism. This is closely related to Christianity. Some of them might even call it a brand of Christianity, just with extra steps. This was fairly popular in Iran at the time. And then Zoroastrianism, which was the state religion, more or less, at the time of the Arab conquests. Both of these were severely hampered by the Islamization of Iran. Manichaeism more or less died out, I think, in the ancient period. It didn't survive to the... What does it say? Oh, okay. No, it survived into the 9th century, but was more or less persecuted everywhere it went, and it no longer had a safe home base in Persia. Zoroastrianism, as I mentioned, still exists to this day. It's just severely depleted, but it almost got wiped out, and that was by the Mongols, who we'll get to. The early Islamic period in Iran was one of compromise. Obviously, the end goal, everyone being Muslim, that's goes without saying. But there was toleration for Zoroastrians. They were labeled in Islam. There's a concept of people of the book, and even though Zoroastrianism has absolutely no books in common with Judaism and Christianity, Zoroastrianism was added in as one of the peoples of the book. And so you could pay a tax called the jizya tax and continue practicing your religion and ostensibly go unmolested. Toleration depended on the time period, but the idea was that you could live side by side with people as long as you paid the tax. But during the Mongol conquests, everyone just dies. That's the whole point: is kill everyone, anyone who resists, make examples of them, and there's much less toleration in the post-Mongol period. The direct Arab control of Iran does not last all that long. So the invasion happens in, 650? What did I say? Mid-700s, or mid-7th century. And then, I guess that's several centuries. Wow. So eventually, no, that's right, because there was a Persian predecessor to this, where they arrested control from the Arabs, but they only controlled a small part of the country, and then they got taken over by the Ghaznavids. The Ghaznavids are the first group that kind of unify a Persia again. When all of Persia was conquered by the Arabs, it's just kind of provinces of the vast Arab empire. But whether that's the Abbasid or the Umayyad Empire, these are dynasties. Sorry, you don't need to know that. The Ghaznavids, they actually control just Persia proper, and then start expanding outwards. You'll see this kind of these yellow indicators of their borders, and so they reestablish a kind of another Persian empire, but they are ethnically Turkish, and Turkish as in they come from this region here, what we now call Central Asia. This is where Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, that's where these countries are. And so, but they do culturally adopt Persian customs, and they are religiously Muslim. So there's no resurgence of ancient Persian religions coming back. It's Islam from now on, but the nature of that Islam does change. So for anyone who knows kind of the major divisions of Islam, right now in the time frame that we're talking about, this is Sunni Islam, which today is by far the most popular form of Islam. But at that time period, actually, it was really open for debate, because the other schools of Islam were more popular in the past. During this time period, though, so we've got ethnic Turks who are culturally Persian. We get one of our first, this is my attempt at trying to do some culture history, of famous Persian poets. So this is Ferdowsi. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And he is credited with writing poetry so good that it saved the Persian language. That there was no reason to, because Arabic is immensely popular. It's the language of the religion, so why not make it the language of the people as well? And his poetry was just so good that and he wrote a national epic of Persia's national epic as well. So kind of, even though the rulers are ethnically from a different place, they adopt Persian culture, Persian language, Persian styles of dress, that sort of thing, and promote artists like Ferdowsi. Unfortunately, the Ghaznavids do not hold all of Persia for long. This is going to start turning into a bit of a highway through a lot of the Middle Ages. So our first kind of invading force is the Seljuk Empire. These are the Seljuk Turks. This is the main way. So I'm just going to wait for this to load. So up until this point in time, Turkish people were from this area here, and then some of them lived in Iran because they had taken control of Iran and ruled there and lived there. With the Seljuk Empire, Turkish people now are in the entire region. They're all through the Caucasus Mountains, and they start in inroads into what is now modern-day Turkey. So this is the start of Turkey becoming Turkish. 1092. There's a famous battle against the Byzantines, the Battle of Manzikert. I think it was 1091. That the Byzantines lose, and the Seljuks move in and start taking over this region. And so what we are seeing is, roughly 1,000 years ago, the broad change of the ethnic composition of this region, where Turkish people are moving in large numbers and changing the ethnic composition of different regions. And that comes with the Seljuk Empire, which quickly breaks apart. It's only around for about 100 years. And then we get just another kind of empire. I didn't want to go into necessarily all details here. This is another empire that kind of sweeps through and tries to conquer. But it's immediately followed up by, in the middle of the 13th century, the Mongols coming through. The Mongol conquests in Iran, you can almost break Persian history into like pre-Islamic, early Islamic, pre-Mongol, and then later Islamic, post-Mongol, because the Mongols just make such a dramatic change. Yes, they're violent conquerors and they do, wreck a few cities, but it's also just they fundamentally reorient just the everything. Everything resets to zero because the Mongols are in charge and they came from way the fuck away. They just sort of came out of nowhere and wrecked face all over the place. Initially, the Mongol conquerors are, it says here Buddhist, but like they're sure they're Mongol Buddhism, but like generally, the Mongol religion is Tengriism, and you can just imagine they are open to different interpretations of religion. But one of the things that happens in this conquest is the Mongols sack the city of Baghdad, which is the kind of heart of the Islamic Golden Age. And that pisses off Mongol leaders outside of this region. So there's also Mongols in... There's also Mongols conquering this region up here. And they have converted to Islam. And so they're so pissed off at the sack of Baghdad that they threaten invasion and conquest. And what eventually happens is, as penance almost, the Mongol rulers convert to Islam in this region. Most of their subjects in this region are Muslim. So it doesn't necessarily, it makes somewhat sense. But it doesn't fix Baghdad. Baghdad's still broken. Baghdad's still sacked and wrecked in the face. And then here we also get the second of our famous poets, Rumi. So Rumi is actually he's from this part of Persia, really. He's from Tajikistan. But as the Mongols are sweeping through, he and his family see the invasion coming and start fleeing westward. And the invasion keeps coming, so they keep fleeing until he eventually ends up in Konya, here, which very recently was Roman, but had only it had recently been conquered by the Turks, the Seljuk Turks. But it was still overtly identified as a Roman city, and that's what Rumi means. Is he lives in Rome, but he lives in Konya, which is nowhere near Rome, but he lives in the land of the Romans. He's the Roman. He is a Sufi mystic. So what that means is he writes esoteric, kind of super weird religious texts about spiritual experiences. Every major religion has some more, there's texts that are more traditional and this is why you pray, this is how you pay your taxes, this is what you do. And then they also have, this is what you do when the demons are coming for you. This is what you do when you wake up in a sweat in the middle of the night and you fear that something's got a hold of you. So Sufis handle that kind of literature through poetry and just regular old writing as well. And then
John, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Are these considered like religious poets? Like they're part of the religion, or are they separate, like their own kind of?
There is no separation
Okay.
between religion and secular in the Islamic world at this time, nor would there have been in the Christian world at this time. It's beginning to form in the Christian world at this time that you can write things that aren't religious, but generally speaking, it's he's a Sufi, so everything he writes is going to have religious overtones. He's part of the religious establishment. Does that make sense?
It does. Thanks.
No problem. Any other questions, comments? Feel free to contradict me as well. I don't know everything about everything, and so if I've got something wrong and please feel free to pipe up.
I will pipe up. I'll just note that at least in Christian Europe at this time, most things are religious, but people are, as you said, writing things that are not specifically religious, and had been for a while. Most of it still has the religious overtones, but a lot of stuff is not strictly religious either.
Yeah, it's really kind of the beginnings of the separation, but it's still the firm separation that we associate with kind of the Enlightenment is going to need a few more centuries to kind of fully gestate. But
I would argue that it occurs before the Enlightenment. That's me.
We should talk about that over wine. I love tearing down the Enlightenment and then building it back up. So if we can rip that apart and reassemble its guts, that'd be pretty cool. Any other questions, comments? Okay. I just wanted to finish off this section by mentioning again that Iran really is kind of just, it's a highway. So there's out of the Mongol conquests, the empire splits and then splits and then splits. The Jalarids are one kind of split, and they kind of take over west of the Zagros-ish, westish of the Zagros, and the Muzaffarids take the east. But then they're just swiped ahead. They're wiped out by another Turco-Mongolic group, the Timurids. If you've ever heard of the character Tamerlane, he is the head of the Timurids. He's the conqueror. This empire breaks up essentially as soon as he dies. His kids are unable to keep it controlled at all. Although one of his descendants later takes an army into India and forms the Mughal Empire. Mughal being kind of a alteration on Mongol. And that's why it's called that. But we don't get a whole lot of Iran for Iranians or Persia for Persians. It's a lot of foreign domination, foreign conquest, and there's just armies traipsing through, conquerors from Central Asia. Any questions before I move on to the next section?
Do you wear wigs?
Do I wear wigs? I do not wear wigs.
Will you wear wigs?
No wigs. That's from a for whatever reason I'm thinking of an Elijah Wood thing, but I don't know. Maybe you're just yanking my chain.
That is what it is.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we've had several centuries of foreign domination, foreign conquest, and just wave after wave of foreign conquest in Iran. And this starts to change in the 16th century. So really, it's been almost 1,000 years but about 900 years or so. But it starts to change in the 16th century with a dynasty called the Safavids. So the Safavids are not ethnically Persian. They are a Turkic group from... they come from a region up here in Azerbaijan. But they are, I guess, on the positive side, really keen on Persian culture and psychotically devoted to fighting. So they come out of, let's see if it, this talks about what's the name of the damn group? I am trying to find... There we are, the Kizbalash. Sorry. Kizilbash. So these are kind of crazy militant group coming out of Azerbaijan. And they are Shia Islam. That's their religion. So 12er Shiism. Just to kind of, I'm going to give you a really, really, really brief lowdown on the differences between Sunni Islam and not Sunni Islam. Remember when we were talking about, the Islamic conquests, and we had the Rashidun Caliphate, and these are the successors of Muhammad. Well, in Sunni Islam, they believe that the successor should be elected. And in the Rashidun Caliphate, that's what happened. There was an election, and I think it was Muhammad's brother-in-law. I honestly can't remember, and I'm going to piss off every Muslim on the planet by getting it wrong. So I'll just vaguely say that the first 4 caliphs, the first 4 leaders, were elected. The 4th one was a guy named Ali, and maybe he was Muhammad's brother-in-law. Grandson. Grandson. Okay, because there was a blood connection, and for a lot of Muslims that did not believe in the election, they felt that it should have been Ali from the start, that it should have been a blood, like an inheritance. And Ali was the rightful successor initially. Once Ali dies, these groups are irreconcilable because a new leader is elected for for those that favor election, and a bloodline is followed for those that follow the bloodline, and they're not even close. They're totally off base. And so the elections create the Umayyad dynasty, and that Umayyad Caliphate, and that continues to do its conquests. And there's these low-key folks that are following blood relatives and descendants, and depending on how many descendants you think are divinely inspired is your version of Shiism. So 12er Shiism, there are 12 what are called imams. And oh God, is Muhammad the first imam, or is he special and different? I think he's special and different, and then there's 12 imams after him. If you've ever heard of Ismaili Islam, which is popular in Oman, that is, if you were to call it like 12er Shiism, it would be 8er Shiism, because they follow 8 imams, not 12. And then there's several other offshoots that are related to Shia Islam. This divide is just permanent, and the sides fight each other, and there's no greater enemy than a heretic, So they fight each other with some intense ferocity. And so it is pretty and pretty intense and pretty amazing when Iran is taken over by Twelver Shiism and like militant Twelver Shia individuals. And they form the Safavid dynasty. Immediately, the Safavids are direct enemies with the Ottoman Empire, who would be considered the stand-up representatives of Sunni Islam. And actually, by this time, they claim the caliphate as well. And so these are two factions of Islam at loggerheads with each other. And if you look at where their borders are, we've kind of got to return to the old Rome versus Persia. It's just that Rome is the Ottomans now. Nonetheless, this is, even though they're ethnically Turkish, this is a group that heavily Persianizes, and it wants to sponsor Persian culture and be a Persian dynasty. And this is a period of flourishing for Persia in the modern period. They're known historically. I think the term is in here somewhere. Is it gunpowder empires? Can't see it. It's in here somewhere. And what that means is that they form in and amongst the proliferation of guns and gunpowder as a technology. And that immediately kind of advances them ahead of those that are not using guns and puts them closer at par with Europeans who have been using guns for quite some time. But then, of course, the Europeans are now in conflict with them. So the Safavids hold control over territory that abuts the Mughal Empire, and that's the Timurids eventually became the Mughal Empire. The Mughal Empire is eventually conquered by the British, and this region here is modern-day Afghanistan. That becomes a battleground in between Iran and the British Empire, effectively. Any questions on that? Okay.
Will you wear wigs?
No wigs. No wigs are allowed. There's a fairly short-lived dynasty. I'm not going to really go into it. Just to let you know that the Safavids don't stay in power forever. They're just supplanted. But this group largely is building on what the Safavids built and kind of expanding on it as best as they can. And then we get to the Qajars. So again, this was also a Turkish group that Persianized, so ethnic Turkish, but Persian culture. Qajars, ethnic Turks, Persian culture. The reason I'm going to focus on the Qajars for a minute is they take Iran into the 20th century. They also, Iran substantially shrinks. Really, the Qajars establish modern-day Iran's borders by losing everything that was associated with ancient Persia. And it is a military leader in the Qajar dynasty, Reza Shah, who does it say that he actually... Yeah, he stages a coup and asserts himself on the throne at the end of the dynasty. So they're in power for mostly the 1800s in Iran. But it's just evidence of a shrinking of Persia, whereas in the 1700s, And the 1600s, Iran had been expanding and kind of like more closer to the borders of ancient Persia. Still not, massive like the Achaemenids, but they had been growing. In the 1800s, shrinking. and then we get to the 20th century and the establishment of the Pahlavi dynasty under Reza Shah. So Reza Shah is the guy that we talked about at the very, very beginning who changed the name from Persia to Iran. He's also focused on European alliances, European technology, modernizing Iran, and he's not fond of democracy. He doesn't establish a democratic Iran. He dies during this Second World War. Yeah, his coronation is in 1925 or 1926. That's when he stages his coup. And then he dies during the Second World War. Iran is actually invaded during the Second World War by both the Soviets and the British because they worry that the oil that's in Iran, if you've ever heard of a little old company called BP, British Petroleum, they started off as the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. They're worried that in the Second World War that the Nazis will try to take possession of oil assets in Iran. And so Iran is neutral during the Second World War, and they just get invaded by the Allies, both Western and Eastern Allies. Even though Reza Shah is an ally and a friend, doesn't really do him any good. They still crash his party. He is succeeded by his son, Mohammad Reza. And whenever you hear people talk about the Shah of Iran, this is the Shah of Iran, because he reigns from the Second World War up until the revolution in 1979. So, initially, after the Second World War, there is a slight attempt to introduce some democratic reforms into Iran. He creates a new constitution, creates a legislature with real power, and then throughout the late 40s and early 50s, he finds out what that means. And what that means is if you give people the ability to elect folks, and you give the legislature actual power to make changes, they're going to do it. And so a man named Mohammad Mossadegh comes to power. He becomes prime minister. And I'm going to go into this a little bit. The way that Iran's constitution was set up, the way that their government was set up, it's not that dissimilar from Canada. So for the Americans, this might seem a little strange. But you've got the prime minister is appointed. The prime minister is not directly elected. But the prime minister is appointed because, he leads the largest party in parliament and is expected to be able to control parliament, to be in the majority of parliament. And he's appointed by, in this case, the Shah. And that's very similar to Canada, where our prime minister is appointed by the king. With Mohammad Mossadegh, he got in on a populist agenda, was appointed prime minister by the Shah, and then started nationalizing things like BP assets, British Petroleum assets, and cozying up to the Soviet Union. In the midst of the Cold War, this was more or less signing your own death warrant. if you were in a country that was allied to the West. Well, we call this the Iranian coup d'état, and even I've described it. I look back through some of my own videos. It's how the United Kingdom and the United States helped overthrow Iran's democratically elected government. Technically, the Shah had the ability to dismiss Mossadegh, just like our king, if he wanted to, could dismiss our prime minister right now. He could just do it. It's part of his constitutional abilities. But just like our king would never do that, the Shah should not do that because he did not have the democratic legitimacy and support of the people. The people wanted Mossadegh. So even though technically it was his constitutional right to dismiss Mossadegh, it's not really in the spirit of the Constitution to dismiss a popular democratically elected politician. And so because of that, he did not have enough support inside Iran to get rid of Mossadegh. But sure as shit, he had support outside of Iran, and that's where the British and the Americans come in to help get rid of Mossadegh. And so, yeah, I've just there's been some revisionist history on this, where for most of my life it's always been called the CIA coup against the democratically elected government of Iran. And the revisionists are like, the Shah just did what he was legally allowed to do. It's in the Constitution. And what I'm telling you is, while he could do it constitutionally, he shouldn't do it. And that's kind of the point of of certain powers. And I guess it just doesn't translate in the States, where if it's written you can do it, you can do it. There's a lot of unwritten rules or written rules that you just shouldn't use in more parliamentary descended democracies, or whatever the hell Iran was at the time, hybrid regime.
John,
yeah.
Who benefits from this like revisionist history like that you're describing?
That's a good question, actually. So ultimately, it's about controlling the narrative. And if you are you're sick and tired of hearing America called the bad guy in various conflicts around the world, you might want to engage in this kind of revision. And I mean, to be honest, the statement that it was, the coup of the democratically elected leader, well, at least it's not 100% accurate. Like, he was democratically elected as like an MP, but he was only made prime minister by the Shah. That's how a parliamentary system works. So there's like a thread, a tiny amount of truth in wanting to overthrow the commonly accepted narrative. But generally, it's people who want. If you feel that the United States or whatever, Britain or whomever is doing the intervention, if you feel that they should have a free rein to intervene wherever they want, whenever they want, however they want, then you're going to favor narratives that support you doing that. So in this case, this would be individuals that favored intervention in Iran were really pushing this new narrative or revisionist narrative that this was helping democracy, not supplanting it. Which, I mean, that narrative is horseshit. Like, that's just plain and simple as horseshit. But the old narrative was, say, not quite entirely accurate. So yeah, it's I'm open to revision, but I don't like revisionists, if that makes any sense.
Thank you.
So, long story short, the old narrative is perfectly fine. Mossadegh had the support of the people. He was
Will you drink water?
Sorry about that. Mossadegh had the support of the people. He was allowed to do the things that he did. those things pissed off some foreign leaders, and they conspired with the Shah to eliminate Mossadegh. And that didn't sit well with the people. And so Iran, which was not a democracy before, but was certainly closer to a democracy than it had been, after the coup, really, really becomes not a democracy. Like a firm authoritarian regime with people imprisoned for various offenses against their regime. The Shah becomes a hated individual who is oppressing the people. And that's so the coup is in 1953, and the revolution is not until 1979. So the authorities are able to keep people in check for several decades, but then that explodes into an overreaction of hatred against the Shah and his regime. So the Iranian Revolution, or actually in the lead up to the Iranian Revolution, I will say that the Americans were intensifying their relationship with the Shah. There were trade agreements for weapons and also for nuclear technology. The Atoms for Peace was a program started in the 1950s where we thought, hey, let's trade nuclear technology with all of these burgeoning countries that are now free of their colonial oppressors or in the process of becoming free, and we'll just trade with them our civilian nuclear technology, and that'll be enough, right? Not realizing how quickly you could transform civilian nuclear tech into weaponized nuclear tech. And so there was a nuclear program in the Shah's Iran, and all of these deals with Americans. And what you could say at the time is the government was very pro-Western. The people were a mixture of anti-Western religious zealots, regime secular people, so people who just wanted to live their lives, but they hated the regime because it was oppressive. And then those that were, say, moderately religious, who didn't appreciate the regime and also didn't appreciate the West, but they weren't radicalized. These would be the kind of the middle of the road Iranians at the time. When the Iranian Revolution happened in 1979, you have an explosion of the religious zealots who hate the West. They hate all connections with the West. There's a whole host of grievances that they have, and all they want to do is eliminate what they consider to be contamination from their country, from Iran. They are able to oust the Shah because no one likes the Shah. And that leads immediately into the Iranian hostage crisis. Do I not have the hostage crisis here? Where the Iranian Revolution was a bit of a surprise to the Americans, who had a diplomatic mission in Iran at the time. When the revolution happened, people were being corralled up and just shot. Foreigners, but like specifically Americans, not any foreigner, just Americans were being rounded up and shot. And so the diplomatic detail out of the American embassy was hidden by the Canadian embassy. Canada still operated an embassy at the time. And if you've ever seen the American movie Argo, It broadly covers the efforts by the CIA to get the Americans out by filming a science fiction movie. Science fiction based on the Argonautica, Jason and the Argonauts. Just funny because the Odyssey is in theaters right now, but it's science fiction and far in the future, and also a terrible script. But they successfully extract the American diplomats who had been, hidden at great peril by the Canadians, and that was good. But many American servicemen were killed. Anyone really associated with the United States.
Those Canadians are so nice.
Yeah, it's almost like we were allies and would do anything for each other. Anyway, the revolution, while being incredibly violent with Americans, tried to at least create the veneer of acceptance by the people. And so they did hold a referendum that said, essentially, do you want us to establish a country based on Sharia law? And the majority voted yes, 99.31%, which, if you've ever done statistics on a vote, should tell you that
Anyway,
that those numbers don't add up. But regardless, they took this as their democratic mandate and established the Islamic Republic. They were immediately met with protests when they told women that they had to what is the name of the damn garb? Hijab. Burqa is the head to toe full thing. Hijab is partial, and then niqab is another partial headscarf. I think that one has the face mask as well. But regardless, the hijab. They had to veil. Religious veiling is not uncommon, especially religious veiling of women. It was actually incredibly common in North America, even up until the 1960s and 70s. Traditional Catholics and Mennonites.
wedding veils.
Wedding veils, yeah. I mean, that's actually, you're not wrong. That's an extension. That's for one day, but still, it's veiling of women is not alien to us. It just seems like it because, we didn't grow up in the before times.
And also women traditionally wearing veils at funerals.
Yeah.
So very, specific days, but nuns still exist.
Yes, but those would be people who specifically dedicated their lives to religious observance.
Well, you have to donate or designate your life to, in some sense, to wearing a veil at a wedding or a funeral too. That is still a choice that you're making.
That's true. And so
the veiling of Jewish women at their weddings is actually pretty interesting. If you go back to the more traditional versions of it, you can't even see through the veil at all. It's completely, they can't see anything. And it's got a whole ceremony behind unveiling her and about it being the most holy and everything. It's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, interesting. So the concept of veiling, I don't think, was what these protesters were rejecting, because it was common in our society then and would have been common in their society, even though there was the Shah led a largely secular government. It's the idea that they're forced to, the idea that they don't have a choice. But that is what the leadership in this Islamic Republic decided to meet Islamic standards, to meet kind of religious and cultural standards, women must veil. And so there were immediate protests. Those protests were, I think, largely peaceful. And there was a delay in the rollout of mandatory veiling, but it still happened. They still were required to veil over time. And so in 1979, Iran is in just a major state of flux. They are in the midst of a massive revolution. They've got protests and potential civil war around the corner. This is the leader of the Iranian Revolution, Ayatollah Khomeini. In 1989, he is replaced by Ayatollah Khamenei. They're totally different people, even though their names are very, very close. And in the midst of this, two things happen. One, Iran, unlike most of the Arab world, when Israel was created, most of the Arab world ejected their Jewish citizens after the loss of the 1948 war. This is, contentious. We could talk about it more later if you want. But the fact of the matter is, Iran didn't do that. Whatever process you think was followed there, Iran didn't. And Jews were relatively safe to stay in Iran, as they had been for thousands of years prior. But not so after the 1979 revolution. There was no law that dispossessed them of land. This was a largely voluntary exodus. And it was based on the fact that there's a quote here. Let me see if I can find it. No, I can't find it right off the top. There's a quote from the Ayatollah, who was asked by the Jewish community, hey, are we safe to stay here? And the Ayatollah said, we make a distinction between the blood-sucking, disgusting, awful Zionist regime and our Jews. Our Jews are safe, but those horrific, terrible, child-murdering Zionists, they have to go. And so the Jews in Iran were like, I don't know if this distinction's going to hold. And so they left. And they headed for Israel primarily. What this did is it gave Israel a massive amount of Persian speakers because, of course, these were fully integrated Jews into Iranian life. But that's one thing that happened. And then the other thing that happened is the Iran-Iraq War. So I went over this a little bit in my Cold War episode. But Saddam Hussein in Iraq was trying to curry some favor with the United States. Iran had become a U.S. The opposite of an ally, a U.S. enemy, but by the hostage crisis and subsequent revolution. And so he invaded with largely Soviet equipment because Saddam played both sides against the middle. And Iran had mostly American equipment because that's what the Shah had built up. The war lasted for 8 years, and was horrifically destructive on both the Iranian and the Iraqi side. Mostly for the Iraqis, the equipment was destroyed. For Iranians, I think there was a much higher casualty count. What do we see here? No, I mean, the numbers are actually fairly comparable. It looks at least twice as many. But, yeah. Potentially up to 600,000 or 500,000 for both. Let's just say it was a bad, bloody war. No war can really be looked at as good, but this was one of the ones that nobody likes to sing songs about. But one of the things that happened was the American equipment that the Iranians had was very effective against the Soviet equipment that the Iraqis had. But they needed more. They needed replacement parts. They needed find ways to get new stuff, and they had just pissed off the Americans, so who were not going to obviously give them direct material. But Israel had American equipment and could get more. And so the evil Zionist regime that they hated so much started becoming a weapons supplier to them during the Iran-Iraq War. Because their equipment was, at least the bulk of their equipment was American. And so, conflict makes strange bedfellows. And it's a strange thing today, especially, to think that there was a time when Iran and Israel were cooperating at least a little bit. That did not last. Absolutely did not last. In 1975, nearby country Lebanon broke out into a civil war. Lebanon is here. It is nearby to Israel, next to Syria and Jordan, Iran, a couple of countries away. The Lebanese Civil War was the result of kind of just colonial mismanagement and various parties all vying to try and control the region. There were a whole bunch of different groups. And Iran saw this as an opportunity. When Israel invaded Lebanon in, I think, 1980, because the civil war was spilling over into Israel's territory. And so Israel invaded Lebanon to create what they considered to be a safe buffer zone. However you view international law, this is not I'm not condoning Israel's actions. I'm just explaining how they perceived it. Well, Iran, in order to counter Israel's encroachment into Lebanon, created the paramilitary organization Hezbollah. And Hezbollah's, reason for existence was to counter Israel's push into Lebanon, and also kind of fuck shit up a little bit in Lebanon. Like, don't let things get too peaceful. Or if they are, make sure they're peaceful on your terms, under your umbrella. And so we've got the formation of Hezbollah and the this is AQ Khan. Oh no, this is Khamenei. Right, late 80s. And in the late 80s, Khomeini dies and Khamenei takes control. He is the Ayatollah, the grand leader of the Islamic Republic until the most recent war, when he's killed in some airstrikes. And then Iran kind of continues on or starts up its nuclear program again. Doesn't really get going in the 80s and early 90s. It's really in the late 90s when Pakistan has developed the bomb. And there's a Pakistani who is part of that program called AQ Khan. And he sets up a network of international kind of like nuclear proliferation. And the Iranians are very interested in that. So that's a lot. Any questions on where I've gone over so far? Questions on where I'm going? Context? Anything like that? Is anybody awake?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so.
I'm stuffing my face with dinner.
Excellent.
It's just a lot of information.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting, but it's a lot.
Yeah, and I try to do a balance. I think I fear I may have overdone it here, but it's just a blah, blah, blah. Here we go. Here's all the things you want to know. So
It's
I apologize
5,000
for that.
It's 5,000 years of history.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
And
So
it's a very complicated area too, with a lot going on.
absolutely. I need a minute to just go to the washroom, get a new drink. So I'm going to pause my recording, and I'll be right back. All right, welcome back.
Thanks, Sean.
All right. So now we're firmly in the modern period, and Iran discovers that it is relatively inexpensive to sponsor groups like Hezbollah to do your bidding, than to have armed forces conduct your actions all over the world. And so Iran becomes what many describe as the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. And that might be post-Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union also, this is read out of the Soviet playbook. This just lists all of the different countries they're allegedly to have activity in. I'm not going to go into details here, just to kind of let you know that Iran is a bad actor on the global stage in a lot of conflicts around the world. Speaking of bad actors, when the United States decides to invade Iraq in 2003 against international requests and law, they get a phone call from the Iranians right after they topple Saddam, because they topple Saddam in like a week, right? And the Iranians are, very eager to talk, very eager to negotiate. And the Americans at the time were like, well, we just got everything we wanted by an invasion into Iraq, so I guess we'll just do an invasion into Iran. We don't need to talk to them. We don't need to discuss these things. We can just take it. And so the negotiations broke down very quickly. And Iran is probably very happy for that, because Iraq transformed fairly quickly from mission accomplished to a massive, massive quagmire, lasting many years and costing many lives. Iran does have some democratic institutions. And so their presidency, this is an individual underneath the supreme ruler, or the supreme leader. Pardon me. But they are elected. They're chosen from a list that's pre-selected by the supreme leader, so only specific people get on that list. And fairly early in the conflict with, or not fairly early, alongside the conflict in Iraq, a man named Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is elected leader of Iran. And he is a lot more vocal, a lot more boisterous, he's just a lot more out there as a voice than previous presidents had been, directly challenging the United States, antagonizing the United States with rhetoric. And it signified a kind of new, more aggressive stance on behalf of Iran. Whereas before they had, engaged in a few conflicts around the world. In the aftermath of the American invasion of Iraq, Iran stepped up their international engagement tremendously. So they become much closer friends with both the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, and Hamas in Gaza. They directly start funding Hamas and providing it with weapons and allowing it for its violent takeover of Gaza in 2007. they and then supporting it with equipment and rocketry so that they can Hamas can increase the rocket attacks against Israel and the frequency. They increase funding of Hezbollah to the point where it becomes, until fairly recently, the most feared non-state military on the planet. Hezbollah was considered by many to be essentially the Lebanese state. And this escalation was met with further escalation. So, nuclear facilities in Iran started exploding because, of course, the Israeli Defense Force didn't like that. Didn't like the ability for Iran to develop nuclear weapons. And they were in, even though they were Iranian material, they were in Syria. I kind of glossed over this a little bit. Iran and Syria, particularly under the Assad regime, were fairly close allies. Assad was, I guess he's still alive. He didn't die. He is an Alawati, which is, Alawatis would consider themselves a branch of Shia Islam. Most other Muslims consider them not just heretics, but like apostates. They're even worse. Was Iran targeting Israel more to piss off the USA? Personal beef. Not like it also angers the United States, but it's very much Iran can become the hero of the Palestinian people if they specifically target Iran. If they specifically target Israel with these exterior groups. Iran being Shia, they don't have an automatic affinity with Arab Sunni groups. They're on the outs. They're ethnically on the outs. They're religiously on the outs. And so they find ways to connect with these groups any which way they can. And with Bashir al-Assad, who was president of Syria at the time, dictator of Syria, he, as I mentioned, was Alawati. So if they recognized him as Muslim, they're kind of like, we're close enough. Then he's on their side there because he recognizes Twelver Shiism as Islam. He's fine with that. So it's a bit of, listen, we're all kind of weird according to those that are around us. How about we band together and hopefully that'll come to something. And so Assad allowed Iranian nuclear development on Syrian soil, and the Israelis blew it up. The Israelis also developed Stuxnet, which was cybersecurity. I don't know if it was a worm. Yeah, it was a worm that wrecked the centrifuges. They thoroughly penetrated the nuclear program in Iran, got this installed on their computers, and the centrifuges blew themselves up. So this is escalation, tit for tat, kind of. The conflict is growing over in the new millennium. And then in Iran, Ahmadinejad was up for a re-election. He got re-elected with an abnormally high amount of support. I remember very specifically that in the region where his competitor was from, so in his hometown, Ahmadinejad won with 98% of the vote. And that was considered, just too far. If you're going to fake the results, but don't piss on me and tell me it's raining. And so that prompted the 2009 election protests, also called the Green Movement, which were the largest protests that Iran had seen since the formation of the republic. There had been some protests, student protests, about 10 years earlier, but these were largely peaceful. The 2009 got very violent, had to be extensively repressed, and set the stage for further repressions of protests moving forward. The 2009 Iranian protests kind of were a bit of a precursor to the Arab Spring, where protests all across the Arab world essentially erupted and demanded that democratic institutions be put in place and the authoritarian regimes be taken down. In some regions, this was handled well. Let's say just Jordan. The king added more democratic aspects to his government, but there were no widespread killings of protesters. In other areas, so in Egypt, the authoritarian regime of what was his name now? No, I click on him here. That's potential president, but it was. Where is his name? Why doesn't it say? Maybe I'm conflating things. Because President Hosni Mubarak. There we go. So Mubarak had been president. He'd been installed by the military some decades previous, and he'd been president for quite some time. And there was suppression at first, but eventually everyone just gave in, and Egypt actually the regime in Egypt collapsed, and democratic forces took over. And this is usually when we say things like, and that was the beginning of the happy times. But what happened was, if you have a repressed, highly religious populace, and you give them free and fair elections, they voted in the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a authoritarian Islamist regime that wanted to institute more or less what was going on in Iran, just the Sunni Islam version of it in Egypt. And so they became just as authoritarian as the previous military regime, but they didn't they didn't give the military the proper respect that they wanted, and so after a year or so, Mohamed Morsi, the elected president, was ousted in a military coup, and the current president Sisi was put in power by the military. I bring this up just to kind of tell you that governments were falling all over the Middle East, and this scared the crap out of Iran. They had repressed their protests as far as they were concerned successfully, but they were terrified of further unrest. And then, in the midst of all of this chaos, the Islamic State explodes onto the scene, taking over, I think, a third of Iraq, conquering a further third of Syria as Syria descended into civil war. And the Islamic State was fiercely Sunni, and like their particular idea of Sunni. What that means is they would gladly behead a Shia Muslim just as quickly as any other as any non-Muslim. And so not friends to Iran, deeply ideologically and religiously opposed. But that didn't stop Iran from taking advantage of the situation Since the Americans had invaded Iraq, they had destabilized the region, and a whole bunch of militias were used to try and keep the peace. And Iran controlled a bunch of Shia militias in Iraq. So they intervened into the Syrian civil war to try and fight the Islamic State. But then they also tried to, this is the overarching name for their group of militias, they tried to solidify support for their militias in Iraq so that they can control Iraq. Bush weapons of mass destruction stuff. No, the weapons of mass destruction from Bush was his reason for going into Iraq in the first place in 2003. He claimed that Iraq had basically chemical weapons and other items that he had historically used on civilians and used during the Iran-Iraq War. And so that was the pretext for going invading Iraq in 2003.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. But basically, Iran earlier in 2003, they were terrified of being super destroyed by the American power, and were probably the weakest they've been in decades. And then fast forward to, this is around 2015, 2016, and they're going from strength to strength. Their overseas assets are becoming more bold and increasing the heat on their enemies. And Iran is taking control of Iraq and just doing whatever they feel like. They start supporting the Houthis in Yemen. So this is, if you read the news, the Houthis are a breakaway group, started a civil war in Yemen. Yemen historically, let's show the country here. Yemen historically during the Cold War was broken up into a North Yemen and a South Yemen. At the end of the Cold War, these two Yemens agreed to rejoin and form one country, but there were still regional differences, and that eventually broke out into civil war, where Houthis, who are Shia Muslims, took control of Sana'a, the capital, and kind of this region of Yemen, and then they were fighting the government forces in kind of the coastal regions. The Iranians started supplying the Houthis, and then the Saudis, who were right next door and consider themselves to be the most important country in the world, they invaded Yemen to support the government and failed miserably. And so this is another victory for Iran, where they're growing more and more powerful. Iran and Saudi Arabia have it's not really a hot, like they don't really have a hot war conflict with each other, but they do have a bit of a cold war conflict with each other, because they both claim to kind of represent Islam. Saudi Arabia has Mecca and Medina, the two holy cities, and that's kind of the source of their reputation and cachet. Iran is the largest, most powerful Shia country, and they have a lot of Shia shrines and Shia holy sites. So that's how they claim their reputation. So anything that makes Saudi Arabia look bad, Iran is very happy about. And they were able to very much embarrass Saudi Arabia in Yemen with the Houthis. And continue to this day. The Houthis are still there. And so with all this strength, yes. Agreed. Robin. I'm not sure if I understand, Band-Aid. You can also ask, like you can just use your voice.
Sure, thank you. I don't know. I thought there was some disagreement over like places that Israel considers like holy, important places is
Yeah.
also
Yeah, absolutely. Okay,
considered words.
yep. So Jerusalem is also a holy city in Islam. Muhammad did what's called the night flight, where he traveled miraculously from someplace in Arabia. I'm not sure exactly what city he was in. He ostensibly traveled miraculously through the air to Jerusalem to witness a site that would become the holiest mosque. And then I think that he ascends into heaven after that. I can't remember exactly. But regardless, Jerusalem Al-Quds becomes phenomenally important in Islam, the third holiest site in Islam. And Israel controls Jerusalem, including the Temple Mount, which has there's two mosques on the top of the Temple Mount. And so that is a point of contention. But that is a point of contention with kind of just Muslims writ large and Israel. And of course, like Saudi Arabia and Iran both have, Muslim governments and Muslim populaces. So they have problems with Israel's control of Jerusalem. But it's not specific to this conflict here with the Houthis or with the conflict between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Does that make sense? I'll take that as a yes. And so
Yes, it does. Thank you.
no problem. And so really what we've got is Iran is going from strength to strength for well over a decade. And they don't seem to be able to lose. Even though they get setbacks here and there, they come back stronger, and their surrogates have even more power. And all of this seems to completely fall away with Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7th. So this is the escalation of all escalations. This is a direct kind of military invasion of Israel proper by Hamas. The Gaza war has been continuing on for several years. It is not a pleasant sight. I don't wish to ever go over that. I did have an episode on Israel-Palestine earlier. I will just say that this escalation was met with considerable force from Israel, both in Gaza as well as in the wider world. Israel assassinated this general in Syria. He was in Syria having meetings with Assad's government, and Israel blew up the building he was in. He's a high-ranking official. I think he was one of the architects of the October 7th attack. In response, Iran hit Israel with a whole bunch of missiles. And then Israel decapitated Hezbollah's leadership by turning every single one of their cell phones and pagers into a bomb. This is quite possibly one of the most potent espionage operations in history.
So rude.
Yeah. It was incredibly impressive. Not a lot of civilians. It was not nothing. It was not zero, but an equivalent military campaign for the same, potentially injured, yes, but equivalent military campaign in order to reach the same objective of decapitating Hezbollah would have resulted in considerably more civilian deaths, like considerably more. Iran, not to be deterred, fired another string of missiles at Israel. And this led to what I guess is called the 12-Day War. I just found out today what Wikipedia calls it. And this was a series of rocket and missile strikes in Iran by American and Israeli parties. This happened back in 2025, and it was meant to go after nuclear facilities. And then that was followed up by the current war, which is still ongoing, where both Israel and the United States bombarded the ever-living fuck out of Iran, killing the many high-ranking officials, including the Ayatollah. So there's a new Ayatollah, his son, who hasn't been seen since the bombardment. And this war is ongoing. Iran retaliated by attacking U.S. allies in the region. They retaliated by closing the Strait of Hormuz. They retaliated by, fighting for their very existence, because that's seemed to be what the United States was after, was the decapitation of the Iranian state. But the Iranian state had just spent the previous 20 years decentralizing to the point where it didn't matter how many of their upper echelon you killed. There was always going to be a regional commander with authority to bomb someone. So, and the Americans knew this. They just didn't care. They just figured, bomb them and they'll give up. And then they told the Iranian populace, rise up and we'll support you. And then they didn't support them. So tens of thousands of Iranians have died by trying to follow in the footsteps of the support that they were never given.
Damn.
Yeah, and I mean this is not a natural escalation. This war just seems out of place. Not that any war ever seems good, but I don't really know where this war came from. I don't know what exactly prompted it, other than Netanyahu wanted a war, maybe, and he promised Trump it would be quick. Trump has been promising the war is over since it started.
Well, I think it came from Epstein,
Oh, just trying to change the topic? I mean, that's impossible.
Yeah. A distraction, basically.
Yeah.
Egos, wanting to be remembered, I don't know.
Well,
yep.
It's stretched on for over 5 months now, and this is possibly... So I've talked about privately and with friends and so on. The is this the beginnings of World War III? Can we tell the difference? Can we know? I was really worried in the opening days of Ukraine that's going to be World War III, and it still might be, because this could be viewed as an extension of the instability prompted by the war in Ukraine. But this is such a dramatic increase in instability that who knows what's going to happen. Yeah. And of course the Strait of Hormuz is a massive major shipping lane. And so it disrupts all global shipping. Not just for oil. I mean, that's primarily what goes out of there, but still. With the Houthis also disrupting travel on the west side of Arabia, it's pretty crazy.
Also, I think one of the things that added fuel to Trump wanting to bomb the shit out of him is, are you familiar with what happened with Venezuela and the United States abducting
Maduro,
Nicolas Maduro,
and
taking him back to the U.S. to stick him in prison? It's so freaking weird.
Yeah, and so with the relative ease in which they accomplished that, I'm sure Trump felt he could do the same with Iran. The thing is that Venezuela was a banana republic, and Maduro was a tin pot dictator. The Iranians have been living in bunkers for 40 years. He vastly underestimated the situation.
I think that
So-
had a lot to do with it too.
Yeah. But more or less, that's all the prepared material I have. I can talk more about the war if anybody has any direct questions, but I'm not a direct expert on it. I just I can offer more context, or I can.
A very indirect
Heck yeah.
on the Iran war. So the Navy, I have friends in the Navy. Well, friends. I know people in the United States Navy, and every year they do war games where they simulate, or they have been doing war games where they simulate a war with Iran, and they try and simulate the war with like a non-existent Iran Navy, because Iran doesn't exactly have much of a Navy or an Air Force. They've got like small motorboats and drones and like all sorts of stuff. And he tells me that every time they've tried to do these war games, they either lose or they go to a stalemate every time because they don't know how to fight an enemy, a quote unquote enemy that's just like non-traditional. Like in the terms of like a traditional standing army, they can't. And of course, it's like Americans controlling the Iranian side in these war games, but they're trying to beat the Americans in these war games, and either they do or they take them to a stalemate every single time in these war games.
Yep, so the process you're describing is red teaming, where you try to defeat your own army, and it's incredibly difficult to red team when you really don't know what the other side is going to do. Those war games are usually so hamstrung; they're so artificially restricted. I wouldn't put too much credit in the fact that that Americans get stalemated or lose. That's probably the desired result of the war game, to be perfectly honest, because of the rules that they put on engagement and so on and so forth. But even if not, it is true that we just don't know how to fight a war against. But in particular, what's been proven here with drones coming out, and I was listening to a podcast the other day, and Americans brought in some Ukrainian advisors and to the Strait of Hormuz, and there was the Iranians were sending out drones, and these were like $20,000 drones, and the Americans started firing $1 million Patriot missiles at them, and the Ukrainians are like, "What the fuck are you doing? Just hit it with a gun! Like, what are you doing?" And so. The rules of engagement need to very much be rewritten in the era of drone warfare and asymmetrical defense.
Well, you'd think United States would have learned something from its war with Iraq, because like even though the traditional war in Iraq ended in a so-called victory, like you mentioned earlier in your presentation, like it just ends up being a quagmire. And what's the cost of a victory in a traditional war, And I mean, it hasn't escalated to the extent that the Iraq war has escalated to, but
yeah, I mean, the conventional war part of the war in Iraq was over in a month. And when George Bush, did his whole pilot thing, mission accomplished, he wasn't wrong from a strategic point of view. The Iraqi army had been completely obliterated. But it didn't take into account the fact that, now what? What's your plan afterwards? And that's the same criticism that has been levied against, and in military context, has been levied against Israel for Gaza. Their plan just seems to be more violence rather than any kind of reconstruction or, tomorrow. And the Israel and American war in Iran. What was your day after plan? You just figured you'd throw some missiles at them and they'd give up? Like, fuck off. That's stupid thought. That's child thinking. So, the war never should have started. And now that it has started, I don't know what's going to stop it. And that's not a good feeling. But any other questions, thoughts, questions about the entire presentation?
I was wondering about something earlier. Like, we have these ideas of nation boundaries as they exist now, because we have like this idea of like countries with very well defined borders. And when you were going through all these ancient empires and ancient peoples, how are borders defined in that time? Like, is there such a thing as a border in that time even? Does that even exist? How did that work?
That's a great question. So, borders in the way that we understand them today, they stem from the Treaty of Westminster. I think it was 1618, but somebody can correct me if I'm wrong there. It's in the 17th century, and it was the result of the end of the wars of religion in Europe, and there was this accepted idea that borders were a thing, and that states had them, and you have to respect them, and really our modern concept of border guards and border protection and all that comes in. Before that, and for the thousands of years before that, borders are amorphous. Borders are hazy. You can see various cultures and civilizations have had like border stones to let you know you're in the territory of whomever. However, that's what's a stone? A stone's not. I can walk here and I can do whatever I want. That's not a stone is a signpost. It's not enforcement. And so you start to see permanent installations like fortresses or outposts as kind of border enforcement. But again, those are limited to one region or another. And so the distance between them becomes this hazy area of, yeah, technically this is Roman territory, but like you can just walk through it and nobody will see you. And so it really does, it really is open to interpretation. Whenever you see these like really, really well done modern maps that have crisp lines for borders, ignore them. Like, that's not true for ancient empires. I mean, it's not true for even today, really. If you look at the crisp line that is this like straight line along the 49th parallel for Canada, when you actually zoom in on the Canadian-American border, you see that it squiggles all over the fucking place. Does that answer your question, or do you?
Yeah, it does.
Cool.
Because I mean, when we look at these, even you showed them, like you look at these empires and look at the, different empires in Iran, like they have these pictures of how far the borders extended, and I was just curious, like, is that a border in the same modern sense that we have borders today? And that kind of did answer that question. Yeah.
A lot of the time, they will also follow geographical boundaries, so like a river or a mountain range, something along those lines, because in some text we'll have a claim that we hold authority, across the entire Nisbis or something along those lines.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem. All right, if there's nothing further, I think I'm going to close it up for the evening. Thanks a lot, folks, for coming out. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean.
And
thanks for having us.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Look in the next couple of weeks. We'll have a vote for whatever the next topic is, and we'll move on. Thanks a lot.